People's Republic of China, the world's second largest economy, the world's most populous country with over 1.4 billion people, and the only surviving communist superpower. Its rise and growth has been a subject of both admiration and fear, skepticism and suspicion. In a matter of a generation, Communist China's romance with Western-style capitalism brought about rapid transformation. Transformation that a diminutive Deng Xiaoping chalked out even as he created a political structure meant to outlive individual leaders. 36 years after Deng Xiaoping institutionalized the two-term ceiling for presidency, Xi Jinping allowed presidency for life. With this, Xi Jinping turned the CCP, or the Chinese Communist Party, back to where it started, a one-man institution. Over the years, through the tenures of Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, the CCP had perfected governance through collective decision-making. This preempted another Mao-like personality cult, which had had disastrous consequences. This arrangement worked for 2 decades, till Xi Jinping toppled this delicate balance in 2012. The CCP machinery, which is the largest political outfit in the world, now plays second fiddle to one man's ambitions.
Why does he want, the third term? I think in the view of him and his supporters, you need to have the same leadership in for a number of years in order to get things done. The other view is that this is an egotistical dictator.
Born in 1953 in Beijing to a prominent revolutionary, Xi Jinping, he was 5 years of age when his father became the vice premier of China. Xi Jinping's family, like most elite Chinese families, faced the wrath of Mao's Red Army during the Cultural Revolution that gripped China in the mid-1960s. The revolution aimed to eliminate any capitalist tendencies in China and unleashed widespread destruction of both property and people. As Xi Sr. fell from grace, overnight he went from being a vice premier and the first Secretary General of the State Council to a counter-revolutionary. In 1962, Xi Jinping fell out of favor with Chairman Mao. 6 years later, as a 15-year-old teenager, Xi Jinping was packed off to the coal mines of the Shanxi province as a sent-down youth. It was said in Shanxi, Xi Jinping had to feed pigs and even clear sewage. His life was a far cry from the sheltered one he had lived till then. But most elite Chinese families managed to send their children to regions where they had connections. Shanxi happened to be his father's old stronghold. Post the turmoil of the revolution, Xi Jinping became redder than red. But the party refused to embrace him, not till he made a record 10 attempts to enroll. And finally, in January 1974, Xi Jinping became a full-time member of the CCP. By this time, his father had also been rehabilitated and secured plum posts. After all, Xi was a princeling, which translated into privilege at crucial junctures in life and career. These are the sons and daughters of powerful and influential Chinese officials, politicians, and businessmen. Notwithstanding the victimization during the revolution, Xi Jinping reaped benefits that came with his father's elevated political status. Princelings, by virtue of their birth in prominent families, are entitled to elite schools and colleges, and later a launch pad into their chosen field, usually politics or business. And Xi Jinping got his fair share. After the revolution, Xi secured significant party positions. Incidentally, his career graph coincided with his father's return to active politics. In 1983, Xi Jinping became the secretary of Zhending County in Hebei province. 5 years later, he served as the secretary of the Ningde district in the southern province of Fujian, where his father's connections once again came handy. In 1994, Xi became the secretary of the Fuchao Municipal Party and governor of Fujian province in 2001. The following year, he became the party chief of the economically vibrant Zhejiang. It was here that Xi Jinping cultivated his image as a crusader for clean politics. But national politics was nowhere on the radar till 2006. It was Chen Liangyu's high-profile fall as the party chief in Shanghai that turned out to be Xi Jinping's big political break. In 2006, Chen was sacked for his role in the $4.8 billion pension fund scandal that rocked Chinese politics. Xi was chosen to replace the disgraced leader.
Overnight, the 53-year-old became a contender for national politics. Since the party secretary of Shanghai is an important position, it's usually represented in the Politburo. And so in 2007, Xi Jinping became a member of the Politburo Standing Committee. He was one among the 9 most powerful men running the world's most populous country, until then the world's 3rd largest economy. Cementing his political ascent, Xi Jinping became the vice president the following year. He was a compromise candidate for the presidential elections between the Jiang Zemin faction that favored Bo Xilai and the Hu Jintao faction that wanted Li Keqiang. After losing the power struggle to Xi Jinping, Li Keqiang later became the Premier of China, a largely ceremonial position with little to no powers.
The following year, the power transition was complete. On 14th of March 2013, Xi Jinping became the 6th leader of his country and the first to be born after the brutal civil war. Along the way, he outmaneuvered rivals like Bo Xilai, who threatened to disturb the delicate balance between the party and the subjects. In just 6 years, Xi Jinping rose from political obscurity to become one of the most important world leaders. For the world, though, Xi was still an enigma. Known more by his popular opera singer wife than for his style of governance or administrative acumen. Preferring the company of fellow elite, Xi Jinping's 7-member Politburo in 2013 had 4 princelings. This was one of the highest in China's history. But for Xi, leaders without a pedigree were the primary cause for the widespread corruption in the party apparatus. This became the basis for the anti-corruption movement. It was the largest crackdown since the Tiananmen Square protest 25 years back. The Communist Party had announced the punishment of more than 100,000 officials on corruption charges. Some, like Hugh Martin of Hong Kong's Morning Bell Press, were sentenced to a decade in prison on charges of smuggling 7 cans of paint. Xi's crackdown, just like Mao's purge, was aimed at eliminating any present or future leadership challenge.
he came up on an internal issue, corruption. He used that as he was selected by others to come up. It was not a question of election. He was selected by others to come up, but then he used corruption. He had to clean it out because there was such a high level of corruption that if he didn't sort of weed it out, the whole Communist Party system would have come under pressure again, like in 1989. But in the process, it also enabled him to consolidate his position in the party.
Ahead of his coronation as the General Secretary, as Xi cracked the whip on corrupt leaders, reports surfaced about his own family's vast and deep business links. The business empire of his sister Qi Qiaoqiao and brother-in-law Deng Xiaogui was built on a network of companies in real estate, mining and infrastructure. The companies were not directly linked to Xi Jinping. But during his tenure as a member of the Politburo Standing Committee between 2007 and 2011, the holding company of their businesses grew in assets from $2.7 million to $156 million. Elitist Xi Jinping's clique comprised of several princelings, like Liu He, the current vice premier, Liu Yuan, son of former President Liu Shaoqi, and Wang Qishan, in charge of the all-important Central Commission on Discipline and Inspection that launched the anti-corruption campaign. Xi Jinping's tenure has been marked by an unprecedented concentration of power. In less than 6 months of coming to power, Xi managed to get all the 3 top political prizes for himself: the all-important General Secretary of the Communist Party, the Commander of the Armed Forces, and the title of the President. On the contrary, Xi's predecessor, Hu Jintao, faced an intense power struggle with Jiang Zemin, who relinquished the presidency but retained the all-important chairmanship of the Central Military Commission. It took Hu Jintao 18 months of political maneuvering to get all the 3 titles. Incidentally, Deng Xiaoping had followed a similar tactic. He retained military control 2 years into the presidential term of his successor. Deng Xiaoping, who was never the president of China, but was the paramount leader, ran China from the shadows even during the tenures of successive presidents. For Xi Jinping, there were no such parallel power centers. As he presided over the world's largest political party, he tightened his grip on every aspect of governance. To further elevate his stature, Xi Jinping acquired or created as many as 10 titles for himself, one of which was the co-leader of China, a title he got 3 years into his presidency in 2016. Apart from the holy trinity of the party, military and government, Xi Jinping headed committees on foreign policy, Taiwan and the economy. Between 2014 and 2018, new bodies to oversee the internet, government restructuring, national security and military reform were formed, all aimed at consolidating power. There were important constitutional changes too. While Deng's contribution was reflected posthumously, Zemin's 3 represents and Hu Jintao's scientific temper found mention only at the end of their terms. But none were able to include their names as they immortalized their political positions in the Constitution of People's Republic of China. Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era was included in the Constitution on 11th of March 2018. With this move, Xi became the first leader since Mao Zedong to be alive when his name was written in the Constitution. What sets Xi Jinping apart from the rest is that besides his thoughts, even his actions have been included in the Constitution. The Belt and Road Initiative, which is Xi Jinping's pet project, launched amidst much fanfare in Indonesia and Kazakhstan, was included in the constitution on 24th of October 2017.
Unable to repay existing Chinese loans, Colombo sought assurances and concessions from China. Instead, what it got was interest rates as high as 6.3% for subsequent Chinese loans. This made repayment almost impossible. And so, in 2015, the Hambantota port, along with the 15,000 acres surrounding it, fell into Chinese ownership. Despite assurances of a civilian use, Chinese submarines docked at the Hambantota port. The incident occurred in 2015 when the then Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was on an official visit to Sri Lanka.
The BRI marked an important pivot in China's geo-economic status. Meant to address the overcapacity of Chinese firms after the 2008 stimulus, it transformed into a vehicle for geopolitical clout in nations as far as Venezuela, which were America's backyard. It allowed China to own its first overseas naval base in Djibouti, where China invested over $10 billion. In 2016, the Chinese economic engine was firing on all cylinders. In Europe alone, it pumped 35 billion euros and snapped up iconic companies like KUKA and Syngenta AG. The EU became hamstrung due to influx of large Chinese funds in strategically located countries like Hungary and Italy. Under Xi Jinping's watch, the Chinese economy grew from $9.5 trillion in 2013 to $18 trillion by 2021. A record number of patent filings by China, due to much higher spending on R&D, was another milestone for Xi Jinping. As China grew, so did its president. Even at the peak of his popularity, Chairman Mao chose and cultivated reliable deputies, those who played pivotal roles at vital, crucial junctures. One of them was Zhou Enlai, Mao's trusted lieutenant and China's longest-serving premier. Zhou played an important role in shaping Sino-Indian and Sino-American ties. In Xi's China, however, there is no place for any other leader. Ending collective presidency has brought back the era of hero worship that characterized the Mao years. 50 years after Mao's Little Red Book cemented the leader's cult status, many volumes of Xi's speeches and writings have now been published. Xi's style of governance was also a departure from Deng Xiaoping, who insisted on hiding strengths to bid time. Xi's China Dream slogan announced his arrival, and with it came a newfound approach towards foreign and domestic policy, that of muscular nationalism. In his first address as China's president on 17th of March 2013, Xi promised his countrymen the loosely defined Chinese dream. It was the great renaissance and was possibly a combination of prosperity, strength, and projection. The pursuit of Chinese dream over time led to social and economic changes and translated into provocative military projection and assertive foreign policy positions. Domestically, this led to relaxation of the one-child policy and curtailing of state monopolies, even as he soon became Xi Dada. But Xi's Chinese dream wasn't just about being powerful on the mainland, but also on the loosely administered Hong Kong. The noose around Financial Power Center was tightened with measures like the security law. In its neighborhood, the Chinese dream translated into claiming ownership of disputed islands in the South China Sea. As Xi Jinping chased lost glory. He continued to strengthen his liberal credentials. On 17th of January 2017, speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, 72 hours before Donald Trump's inaugural address, Xi defended the liberal world order against protectionism. The sight of a Chinese president championing Western values and Western institutions at the very heart of capitalism underscored Xi Jinping's success. Success in projecting himself, success in projecting China as a superpower that respected a rules-based order. Xi Jinping's Chinese dream also brought about increased hostility and tension. Xi's relationship with Donald Trump, the 45th President of the United States, went southward, and with it the prospect that Xi would follow the Deng Code of Governance. The two leaders started on a high, with Trump being accorded the highest privilege for a foreign leader. Xi hosted Trump at the Forbidden City. But despite the red carpet, Trump's 4 years in Oval Office were spent in correcting America's anomalous trade relation with China, which had led to soaring budget deficits. Besides Trump, Xi also struck a good rapport with India's popular leader Narendra Modi. While Xi visited India as many as 3 times, he played host to Modi a record 5 times. Highest since the two countries became independent. But just like Trump, Xi's relations with Modi also nosedived from 2019 onwards. At the much-hyped informal meeting between the two leaders, the picturesque setting belied the tense meeting with negligible progress on thorny issues like border disputes. As Xi Jinping traded his regular black suits for the iconic grey Mao suit, he created the most definitive imagery of a post-Mao leader. As Xi waved to the thousands gathered at the Tiananmen Square in July 2021, he delivered a simple but a powerful message.
光荣正确的中国共产党万岁!
Xi's China had arrived, and in it, space for other leaders, including the chairman, was shrinking.
We also have another Mao-like strongman, Xi Jinping. So it looks like strongman, one-man rule is really the norm for the Communist Party, which idealizes struggle. And it looks like the Deng years are really the aberration. And so we have to understand the nature of Chinese communism, and it is more like Mao than it is like Deng.
6 weeks after Mao-style imagery in 2021, Xi's political ideology was introduced in school curriculum to be taught to kids as young as 5. Whipping up sentiment around Tianjia, where the Chinese king had the world bestowed upon him, Xi Jinping aspires to be the new Red Emperor.